Think about every startup success story you've consumed in the last 5 years. Elon, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, they dropped out, they bet everything. So the lesson must be, drop out, bet everything, ignore the skeptics. But what about the hundreds of thousands of people who did exactly that and disappeared? You work hard, you sacrifice, you show up when others don't. You do everything the books tell you to do, everything the podcasts say to do. And then someone else gets the job, gets the deal, gets the life, and you sit there wondering, what did they have that I didn't? Was it talent? Was it effort? Was it connections? Or was it something you can't control, can't measure, and were never told mattered this much? This is the science of luck, and it will make you question everything you thought you knew about success. Let's start with something simple. A coin flip. Heads or tails, 50-50, clean, predictable. But flip that coin 100 times and you'll get streaks, long, convincing streaks. 10 heads in a row, 15, sometimes more. And if you didn't know it was a coin, if you just watched from the outside, you'd assume the coin had a gift. You'd write books about its mindset. You'd pay to attend its masterclass. 10 heads in a row doesn't mean you're special. It means you flipped long enough. This is what randomness looks like. And it looks a lot like talent. In 1944, a statistician named Abraham Wald was handed a problem by the US military. They wanted to reinforce their warplanes to reduce losses. So they did what any rational team would do. They studied the data. They mapped every bullet hole on every plane that returned from combat. The wings, the fuselage, the tail section, all riddled with damage. Reinforce those areas, the general said. That's clearly where we're taking the most hits. Wald looked at the data and said, "You're looking at this completely wrong. These bullet holes aren't showing you where planes are vulnerable. They're showing you where planes can survive being hit. The planes that took engine damage, they never came back. They're not in your data. You're only studying the survivors." He called it survivorship bias. We build our entire model of the world around the people and things that made it through, and we completely ignore the graveyard of everyone and everything that didn't. No TED Talk, no Netflix documentary, no Forbes profile. You don't hear their stories because there's no algorithm surfacing failure. So we reverse engineer wisdom from the winners, package it into a morning routine, and sell it back to the next generation. Wake up at 5 a.m., embrace the grind, fall in love with the process. And meanwhile, thousands of people who followed that exact playbook are still broke, still struggling, still wondering what they missed. What they missed wasn't discipline. It was a different roll of the dice. So what actually separates the ones who made it from the ones who didn't? Let's talk about timing, because it's more powerful than almost anyone admits. Bill Gates is brilliant. No reasonable person disputes that. But Gates also had access to a computer terminal in 1968, at age 13, through his private school in Seattle, at a time when most universities in the world didn't have that kind of access. He was born in the right country, in the right city, to the right family, at the exact right moment in technological history. Change any one of those variables, and the story changes entirely. That's not a takedown of Gates. That's a fact he has openly acknowledged himself. Timing doesn't just mean what era you were born in. It means where you enter a system relative to its growth curve. The first dozen employees at Google joined when the stock price was nothing and the future was uncertain. The first people to hold Bitcoin bought it for cents because they were in the right online forums at the right time. Being early isn't vision. It's usually proximity and luck dressed up as foresight, recognized only in retrospect. Now here's where the conversation starts to make people uncomfortable, because some of the advantages that drive success aren't random at all. They're structural. Where you're born determines your postal code. Your postal code determines your school. Your school determines the quality of your teachers, the ambition of your peers, and the density of your network. Your network determines who opens doors for you, who vouches for you, who takes your call. And none of that Not a single link in that chain is something you earned. This isn't ideology, this isn't politics, this is sociology backed by decades of data. Research consistently shows that professional networks are the single biggest predictor of career outcomes, above skill, above effort, above raw talent. A resume from a prestigious university generates significantly more interview callbacks than an identical resume from a lesser-known school. Not because the candidate is more qualified, because the name signals a network, an environment, a starting position in the social hierarchy. And you didn't choose where you were born. You didn't choose your parents' income bracket. You didn't choose your first school. None of that is earned at birth, but all of it shapes what you're able to earn afterward. Now, and I know this part is coming, this is where people get defensive. I worked hard. I came from nothing. No one handed me anything. And that's probably true, and it genuinely matters. Hard work is real. Resilience is real. Personal agency is real. But here's what the data says when you actually strip away the narrative. Hard work is necessary. It is almost never sufficient on its own. In 2018, researchers published a study modeling talent, luck, and career outcomes in a simulated environment run hundreds of times. The most talented individuals' highest raw ability were almost never the most successful. The most successful were those with moderate talent and above average exposure to lucky events. It sorts for talent plus timing, talent plus network, talent plus opportunity. Strip any of those away, and the most talented person in the room frequently loses to the luckiest one. We reward outcomes, we don't reward process. And that creates a world where the person who wins gets celebrated as exceptional, even when their edge was mostly positional. Let's go one level deeper. Something called the Matthew effect. Sociologist Robert Merton named it in 1968, borrowing from the Gospel of Matthew, "To him who has, more will be given." It describes one simple, devastating dynamic: early advantages compound. A child who learns to read slightly earlier gets slightly more attention from teachers. That attention produces encouragement. Encouragement produces more reading. More reading produces vocabulary. Vocabulary produces confidence. By middle school, a tiny early edge has become a measurable gap. By high school, a chasm. By adulthood, a completely different life, traced back to a few months' head start at age 5. This plays out everywhere. The startup that gets its first round of funding gains credibility, which attracts the next round, which attracts talent, which attracts customers. The rich don't just have more money, they have better lawyers, better accountants, better access to every system that shapes outcomes. Every advantage makes the next advantage easier to acquire. This is how inequality compounds, not through malice, through math. So here's the question nobody wants to ask out loud. What if the person who deserved to win never even got a chance to play? We'll never know, because we only see who made it to the table. And here's the thing about luck that really messes with your head. The people who benefit from it most are usually the least aware of it. There's a well-documented pattern called self-serving attribution bias. When things go well, we credit our decisions, our discipline, our character. When things go badly, we blame the market, the timing, the circumstances. It's not a character flaw, it's a cognitive default wired into almost everyone. But the consequences are enormous. Because when a successful person believes their success was purely earned, they design systems around that belief. They build hiring criteria that favor people who look like them, came from where they came from. They mistake pattern replication for meritocracy, and they do it sincerely, not maliciously. That is the real danger of the myth, not greed, blindness. So what do you actually do with all of this? The goal isn't to feel helpless or guilty. The goal is to be accurate. First, stop confusing outcomes with inputs. Someone failing doesn't prove they didn't try. Someone winning doesn't prove they were most deserving. Second, get honest about your own starting line. Not to perform humility, because accuracy is a competitive advantage. If you know where your advantages came from, you can leverage them deliberately instead of accidentally. Third, engineer for surface area. Luck isn't evenly distributed, but you can increase your exposure to it. More attempts, more networks, more visibility. Volume is a real strategy, not a consolation prize. The people who catch lucky breaks aren't always the most talented. They're often the ones who showed up the most. And fourth, build systems that don't require everyone to be lucky to get a fair shot. Because the goal isn't just to win a tilted game. It's to understand the tilt well enough to navigate it or change it. Luck is a lie in one sense. It isn't random chaos. It's a system. Hard work is a lie in one sense too. It isn't sufficient on its own, but it's still the best controllable input you have. So keep working, but work with your eyes open. Think sharper, know faster.